Okay, now we're going to pick up with behavior chains. So behavior chains, much of behavior is more than any single kind of operant, right? So we can use a simple example of, I say sit, right? It is my discriminative stimulus or my antecedent. Then there is the behavior of sitting, followed by a consequence of reinforcer. That is our single operant situation. However, that only sort of helps us address a very small fraction of different kinds of behaviors that our animals engage in. Rather, a variety of different kinds of behaviors are what we call behavioral chains, or in other words, these individual units can be put together as like little links in a chain for substantially more complex behaviors. So a simple example of that, right, is going to be our detection dogs. There isn't a simple, one cue that the dog engages in one behavior, and then there's a consequence. There's multiple things that the dog has to do in a detection scenario. We can break them down into these single operants, but they will be little links that will all sort of build together into a chain. So what might this actually look like? So this is a potential way of looking at this, what we call a search behavior chain, right? Is that there might be some discriminative stimulus that would indicate the probability that finding something would be available. This might be putting on a harness. This might be the handler saying search, the handler saying seek, or that you are in a certain kind of environment that the dog has prior training or history that indicates that searching would be productive. So all of these kinds of things would be discriminative stimuli, which means that they indicate the availability of reinforcers that are available in the environment. Then they engage in a behavior, in this case searching, that they actually search a particular environment. And then the consequence of searching is coming across a trained target odor, at which point they might engage in some type of alert behavior like a sit, a stare, or some type of aggressive response, whatever that happens to be, or whatever that sort of trained final alert is. And they'll get what we call the terminal reinforcer or a final reinforcer like a toy or a piece of food. So now this goes beyond our simple sit, dog sits, gets the reinforcer. We have multiple components going on here, but it's basically just two units strung together. So we have our discriminative stimulus 1, which is the search command or the context or putting on the harness, anything that indicates that searching behavior is going to be reinforced. Then we have behavior 1, which is going to be searching. And then we have our first reinforcer, which is coming across a target odor that is reinforcing that search behavior. It also serves as the second discriminative stimulus. So it serves as one, a reinforcer for the searching behavior, but it also serves as the discriminative stimulus that indicates that if you alert, engage in behavior 2, that there will be a terminal reinforcer. So then we just group this first chunk into link 1 and the second chunk into link 2. And basically what you can see is that we just have those two individual simple behavioral units, or the antecedent behavior consequence, where behavior 1 is searching. Discriminative stimulus 1 is the discriminative stimulus that indicates to search. And then the reinforcer 1, or what is reinforcing this searching behavior, is the target odor itself. This target odor becomes that first reinforcer because it becomes a discriminative stimulus for the final reinforcer. And you have essentially associations between odor and the final reinforcer through Pavlovian conditioning, that through their learning history, this odor in of itself becomes a conditioned reinforcer or a learned reinforcer for that search behavior. So what is maintaining search is coming across the target odor, which then is occasioning the trained final alert response, which is then leading to the terminal reinforcer. So one thing that you might notice in your own training programs is that across time, the odor itself, or when the dogs come across that odor, that can engender a variety of responses that seem to indicate that just smelling it in of itself is very reinforcing and becomes very valuable. And that occurs because it basically develops reinforcing properties through its association with the terminal reinforcer in time, so that actually coming across an odor is what is maintaining that searching behavior as the reinforcer for that. So in this context, we do have two reinforcers. We have the reinforcer, which is the odor itself, and we have the second reinforcer, which is the sort of what we'd say the non-conditioned reinforcer, or the primary reinforcer, or the terminal reinforcer. And what I mean by that is that this is going to be that final sort of backup reinforcer, that toy, that food, whatever that happens to be. That'll be the thing that the dog doesn't really have to learn about, but is going to have this really high value. And through this learning of this behavior chain, this odor will build its own reinforcing properties and will be one of our conditioned reinforcers. It's obviously not going to develop to be as strong as the terminal reinforcer, but it very well might come quite close, so that the dogs might show a very strong positive response to that conditioned odor, because that becomes that sort of reinforcer here, so that we have a full antecedent behavior consequence in link 1 and a full antecedent behavior consequence for link 2, and they are linked together through the target odor, which is serving both as a discriminative stimulus for the trained funnel response and a reinforcer for that initial searching behavior. So then we can start thinking about a variety of ways that we can add other links to this behavior, or other kinds of behaviors that are also chains. So with that, that wraps up our introduction to operant conditioning. So hopefully from here, you can describe the process of operant conditioning. You can identify an antecedent behavior consequence relationship and define what the discriminative stimulus is, what the behavior is, and what the reinforcer is, and demonstrate an example of operant conditioning in your training program. So part of your assignment for this module is that I want you to think about what is a component within your training program that you can identify that is an example of operant conditioning, and identify what your discriminative stimulus is, what the behavior requirement is, and what the consequence reinforcer relationship for that is. And then I want you to be able to describe the canine detection in terms of the operant behavior chain, and identify operant and the Pavlovian components to a detection task. So remembering that in our operant task is our antecedent behavior consequence, and then our Pavlovian component is going to be this relationship between our conditioned stimulus or reinforcing stimulus here that's going to get associated with this terminal reinforcer, so that this odor is in of itself going to develop a Pavlovian relationship and develop conditioned reinforcing properties through this odor final terminal reinforcer association. And that wraps up our introduction to operant conditioning and the detection chain for detection dogs.